There, a little more light in the subject. Yeah, me, for a short time. June 18th, the year of our Lord, 2024. A thought hit my head because it's one that's pretty consistent, but it was worse when I was at Empire Tractor. For some reason, coming in early was a problem. I never figured out why. I never could. There was one guy that came in early, and he'd clock on and make his breakfast and clean his tools up and get ready for the day, but he'd be clocking in anywhere between 6 and 7 a.m. Yeah. They talked to him, and finally he relented and came in later. But he'd come in between 7 and 7:30. He wouldn't immediately. Fact is, when I started working there, he and another fellow were there, and they were just talking away, and they hadn't clocked in yet. So for the first week I was there, I didn't think there was anything big deal. Between 7:30, quarter of 8, we'd clock in, unlock our toolboxes, stash everything, and usually, not always, but usually we had a work order, a job we were working on. So we'd start. Boss rarely came in before 7:55. And when I say rarely, normally he came storming in the door, blew it open with his lunchbox, come screaming across the place, and get into his room and fire up his computer anywhere between 7:55 and sometimes 8:15, depending on what was going on. Now, you say, well, what do you... No, we didn't care until later. And what had happened was, because the one employee came in and was scarfing a half hour to an hour some mornings, which was... If it was a half hour, he was scarfing 15. If it was an hour, yeah, he was scarfing a half hour, occasionally longer, but usually around a half hour. So what he took to clean up his tools, and he'd have his breakfast in the toaster oven. But that's the irony of it. He'd have his breakfast in the toaster oven, eat breakfast while he was there, and he'd be working on the job in between. So it wasn't all that odd. And the funny part of it is, up front, management might not even come in till 9, 10, or not at all. Just management didn't care. Some management came in roughly about 9 o'clock every day and would leave 4 o'clock every day. So we kind of looked at each other in shop like, yeah, we've seen this before, but why does it continue? I mean, multiple companies. And we just kind of sat there when I got a speech one day, and he says, you come in here with him in the morning? You come in early and clock in early? So I wouldn't say early. What do you mean? I said, usually don't clock in until quarter of, sometimes 20 of, but usually it's around quarter of. Why? You don't get here till 8 o'clock. And I said, I don't often have a work order. If I come in here at 7:30 and I have a work order, sure, I'm going to clock in and go to work. Why? Well, I don't want you in here early. You're stealing from the company. What? I'm not the guy stealing from the company. You came in, I was working on the job. You're coming in, clocking in too early, and just robbing from the company, making your breakfast. You're talking to the wrong guy. He says, no, I'm talking to the right guys. No, you're not. Now, we were contemporary in age. If you're 20 years old, you just stand there sometimes. I'm telling you I wasn't, but, I'm sorry if you misunderstood. And, and I just said, no, you're talking to the wrong guy, and you know it. What's going on here anyway? Well, you're coming in early, stealing from the company. I said, I'm stealing nothing from the company. Later on, I asked the service writer what the heck was going on, and he says, I really don't know because I don't see it. I come in later than you guys, which he did because he had to drop his kids off and thus and such. He was rarely in before 8 o'clock, usually 8 to 8:30, and sometimes as late as 9 if something went wrong. And they allowed it in the company. It was just normal. So those things nobody in the shop really complained about. I mean, no one, including the guys that loved union types. Okay? So nobody was saying anything about it. But we noticed that, as in every business, if anything happens in the shop they don't like, everybody from up front all the way down through comes clamoring on the shop. So the service manager, apparently, I was talking to the service writer about the service manager, having an off day or something, because every once in a while he'd just go off on something, just blow his cork. The one time he blew his cork about coffee or something else, and we just looked at each other. I was talking about coffee. He says, yeah, I know you were. I don't know what his problem is. And it happened quite often. And after a while, it just got to the point where he had to sit down and have a talk with him. In fact, they had just about a shouting match several times about such things. He says, you want these guys to work for you, but you're out there reaming them out for things that they aren't doing. What's going on? Well, when I was talking with the service writer, we came to the conclusion that what had actually happened, I told him, I said, I've seen this before. He said, what's that? And I said, here they have the bonus, so he's trying to protect his bonus on one thing, but I said, he's gone beyond that. Oh? I said, I think he's partially either invested or partnered up with him. He says, that's probably as good an explanation as I've ever heard. He said, there's no reason you come in here like this, jump all over everybody else on time schedule when you're also, salary or not, when you're also an employee of the company. He said, that's right. He said, unless you're invested somehow, they come out to correct you or ask you about certain things and work with you. But as soon as they get into management, it's barking. It's no longer talking, saying, hey, what's going on? Why are you coming in late? No, not anymore. Don't you ever come in late again. And that's what it turned into while I was there. And I was only there a year and a half. And I say, well, that was because you were there. And you were, no. Something had changed in upper management. They even brought in half a dozen branches, and they brought in a service advisor, corporate service advisor, he had shingles down the length of his arm and to his toes, but it didn't make any difference because he was dumber than a box of rocks. We were all trying to figure out why somebody who just hit 40 years old, and we started comparing, and the younger service writer looks at me and he says, I always wonder about somebody that's had that many jobs through the years. And I said, no, not really. I said, especially in my case, you just get fed up with certain things. You go somewhere else. You don't fight with people about it. But I said, when he's sitting there bragging about every place that he's been and how wonderful he was, and he moved on to other places for whatever reason, I said, now I'm concerned. He says, you're right. I said, when you're bragging about what you did there, but you had to leave there too, we were wondering. Oh, you come across jobs that you were the man for the job. You did great while you were there, and even the customers might think that. But after a while, its egos start to get in the way quite often, as it did with many companies I was in. Ego was terrible. If you figured out something that somebody else didn't, one case I had years ago, William Tom, I wasn't supposed to be hired. I was supposed to be hired as the next golden boy by somebody who wasn't supposed to be the branch manager, but somehow got himself in as a branch manager position where there wasn't even the position in the branch. We were a satellite office of another branch that was much larger. In fact, the parent company. They were supposed to keep in touch of what was going on. He was supposed to be service manager, parts manager, and there was one salesman. That's it. That's all there was supposed to be. And somehow this guy got himself involved in all three ends of the operation. And he sat there and says, our total gross income has gone down, but he says our profitability, the margin, he says, went through the roof. Look at this. He showed me numbers of how wonderful he was and what he had done. And what had happened was, and he didn't want to admit to it, was same idea. He was so invested in the company personally, trying to work his way up to the ladder from this company into the parent company, not just the main branch, but the parent company, that he got himself into a problem where customers didn't want to deal with him, didn't trust him anymore because he was making wide promises without talking to the people on the ground doing the work. In fact, he got so vulgar and angry that he asked how to get a particular bearing race off a yoke for a hydrostat. I said, well, we used to just torch the things off. You cut them until you get a point, hit them with a hammer, they break, and they'll slide right off. And he started screaming. I mean, uncontrolled screaming. I said, you have two choices at this point because nothing's going to hold. I said, torch or grind. Then he lost it again. Metal flying everywhere. You're going to... Did you wash it off? And I was 23 at the time, I think. He just went off wild. We came in the next day, and he torched it off when nobody else was around. And he nicked the shaft, which is common, but it was one of those things where, dude, if you were thinking at all and your ego wasn't getting in the way of being doctor-teacher. Yeah, not just teacher. He was doctor-teacher. I'm going to train you guys on, I just sat there, it's a simple hydrostat. What are you talking about? He was furious and livid again. There's some things that are simple whether you've worked on them before or not. And for some of us that have been in the shop, you come out screaming about this, that, and every other thing without talking with us first, asking questions, you have a problem. And administrative problems seem to be a human nature problem. Their ego is in front of them before they ever come out. It's almost as if they're coming out holding their ego, saying, yeah, I dare you, sting it. And some of us are going to sting it without even trying. Why? Because they're holding it so close, they're waiting for anything. You can be absolutely correct and present it in the right way. But if it ends up making them look bad, their ego is stung and they're coming after you. Back to the original one I was talking about at Empire Tractor, as it turned out, we were pretty certain that somebody was invested in the company, not just his position. He was invested in the company. It was the only way we could come up with an explanation why we had a 10 horsepower compressor that we were told just needed a starter. Yeah, it would have been $300-400. And what do they call a starter? It's a contactor set. That's all it is. There was 3-phase motor. They had 3-phase power. And I said, well, get the thing. I can wire it in. What do you mean you can wire it in? It takes specialized. No, it doesn't. It's 3-phase. You have 3 wires instead of 2. What if you hook it up wrong? I said, the motor goes backwards. Yeah, then what? You take 2 wires and turn them. That's all. Well, yeah, but you have to know. No, you don't. Pick any 2 and turn them. A and B, C and B, B and A. It doesn't matter. Just, well, no, I've worked on 3-phase before. I said, I've worked on 480 3-phase before. I said, this isn't complicated. Dangerous if you're not knowing what you're doing, yes. But it's not complicated. He blew a cork. No, you won't touch that. I said, asked the question. This is when I was new, first week. I said, what's it doing here? What do you mean? Well, they might want to fix it someday. Over in the corner is a one-man shop, 5-horse air compressor for the entire building that was set up so poor that there was a place in there where there's 300 feet of 1-inch iron pipe. So by the time the air got over there, one side, whee! The other side, whee! Literally. There's so much restriction and so little pressure. 2-stage, the big one, went 175 to 180 pounds. The little one, they had to turn it down to 130 to keep it from popping breakers and such. To get the volume on a long distance, you need the pressure. If you don't have the pressure, you'll never get the volume. Well, you're only supposed to have, yeah, you get the pressure here at the source point, so you can get your 90 to 100 psi on the other side because of friction and losses all the way through the pipe. But they didn't. One fella turned when nobody was looking and went and turned it up, and still says it's better, but it's still anemic. So the one guy says, well, everybody's converted over to battery. And I said, well, that's kind of bogus. And he looks at me, and being older, contemporary, and been around, I said, that's kind of bogus. He says, what do you mean? I said, so the company being too cheap to buy an air compressor or fix the old one that was here, they put in this little 5-horse piece of crap that might be overtaxed even in my home shop, is here in this building selling 3 lines of tractors, and the guys, 5-6 guys out there with air tools. Said, you have enough compressor here for 1, maybe 2 air tools at a time. He says, yeah, but the other guy's converted to battery. I said, yeah, that's my point. He said, what do you mean? The company is sleazy, so I'm driving all the way up here 90 miles a day for a company that they decide not to do something, and they lay the burden on the people they're underpaying in the shop. Well, what do you mean? Everybody likes, it doesn't matter whether they like them or not. They have to buy them. You're talking thousands of dollars when these guys could drop $1,000 here, and nobody would have a problem after that. And they might still buy the battery operated stuff, but they wouldn't need it all at once, would they? He said, so guys out there dropping $2 or $3 to buy battery operated stuff, well, you can get Harbor Fake. I said, yeah, no, you can't. So they're out there spending $2,000 or $3,000 minimum to replace what could have been done here for $1,000 to $2,000. And the company's too cheap to cover that? Well, they spent money on this compressor, didn't they? Said, yeah, a joke in the corner. He says, well, you don't know how big a joke when you get down to it. Then he told me about, he didn't, but somebody else told me about the piping, and I took a look at it. They came out here, all the way down the full length of the shop, or 3/4 the length of the shop, across the back side of the shop, or front side actually, and then all the way down the other side, all the way to the back wall. They could have come out, split, gone across, and over to here. Or, even better yet, they could have come out, split, gone across the top, split. Any one of a number of things that they could have taken 50 feet to 100 feet off the piping. And they should have been running 1.25 to 1.5 inches on the main lines, broken off down to 1 inch lines from there, but no. That was the dumbest designing I had seen since Anderson. I mean, dumb. Just pathetic. But we came to the same conclusion that in management, if they're not there, A, working with it, and B, they're invested in the company, they will take it out of their employees' hides. They don't care anymore. It's sad. And you say, what do you mean? They're getting, this is the problem of morality in our culture. They're getting squeezed from the feds. They can only do so much to get more money out of the customer because they're probably already scamming them to begin with. So what do? Their morality suddenly gets weak, and they'll take it out of their employees. We're paying you a good wage per hour. Well, guess what? You're going to spend it on tools, so we don't have to. It's kind of like out there having traffic stops, checking people for seat belts, and checking their licenses and registrations, when they're supposed to be checking them at regular, do you have a taillight out, stop, kind of thing. Well, what is it? They're extracting money out of people in a whole nother way. The cops have to be out there. Let's go after the people for extra cash. People are out there driving, and cops are out there driving. Catch everyone we can, innocent or not. Wait a minute, that's not a primary offense. Well, it wasn't. We just stopped you because. Now you're not wearing your seatbelt, we're going to fine you. Look at that, we got a free $500. And then there's nobody available to chase drugs and criminals. And in a shop, the guys are sitting there with probably same $2,000 or $3,000 in air tools that they can't use. They've already spent money on. But now they want them to spend more money for the shop. The same was with hydraulics. I went through the hydraulic fittings. I said, this is horrible and pathetic. He said, what do you mean? We've got a lot of fittings there. I said, they're all pipe thread. It's not even farm equipment uses pipe thread anymore. Well, yeah, but no, this is ridiculous. So I went through and separated some stuff out, saw some hoses that were probably usable, others that have been around since Moby Dick was a tadpole. And tossed a lot of junk out and went in to look at some others, and I put them in there, and I kept getting these questions. I went to the cart, the stuff's not there. I said, you're right, it isn't. Well, where's it? It's in a bucket over there. Oh, it's still there. Yeah, I hadn't moved any of that. Then there was another bucket. What do you mean? It's not in a cart because it doesn't have anything to do with the flow rater that's on the cart. The stuff that's on the cart is for the flow rater. I said all the other hoses are over there. So what do you mean? In a bucket of adapter hoses for testing. Oh. So in other words, I don't have to take the whole cart out. I can just take the bucket out if I want. Take a 5-gallon bucket instead. So I went through the shop with that, and I saw broken tools, broken pullers, Harbor fake pullers. I mean, garbage stuff. From the bad Harbor, really bad Harbor Freight days, not just the modern bad days. I mean, bad junk, stuff that you wish was made in China. Excuse me. And he just says, well, the guys keep breaking it, and they don't do anything about it. So what do you mean they don't do anything about it? They break a shop puller in the shop in shop use. The shop fixes it. It's just, no, we don't do that anymore. You break it, you go buy your own. Marked off. We had even special tools in there that were broken. Then they had special tools they could have sold on eBay and made a couple grand. They have tools in there that were the earliest tools for the 30 and 70 series cases. It's insane. It's nice to have them there, but they had them all nice and neatly inventoried. Any of the new stuff? Yeah. Excuse me. They like to do some tire work there once in a while. Do you think you could find the tire stuff? No, it was in 3 locations because it came from 3 separate stores, amalgamated into one. And they never bothered to put it together in 25 years. I just... Well, it wastes a lot of time to go there and coordinate. I said, what? Do you get enough time? We're an ag shop. You get enough time every so often. You got the winter. And then you got the spring break until they start chopping hay. There's usually a couple of weeks to a month. I said, then later on, you've got the break between hay and the harvest because they're converting over. So everything slows down again. They're not burning up their hay tools. Then after the main grain harvest, now you're going into corn. Corn starts early, but there's usually a lull in there someplace, and then you got the lull again at the end of corn season. They run the combines for a little while into winter, and everything stops. But when they're running the combines, they're not coming in here unless they absolutely have to. Chopping, that's a different story. If it doesn't work right, it's got to be now. But I said there's usually about 3 lulls during the year. I said, didn't find enough time for that. Why? Because it would be put on the shop ledger. The company was set up so that the money came out of the shop, and even if it was normal anyway, you had to pay the guys, then they would put it against the shop as a negative, that they didn't sell enough work time. Which it is a negative, but then again, it ought to be a negative against the company itself, not finding a way to advertise and bring the work in, or having a product support rep out there, knocking on doors, bringing things in, as well as selling products. So you just sit there scratching your head saying you're a multi-million-dollar company with, 5-6 branches, and you have to steal from your employees. I actually said something like that out loud several times. I said, wow. I said, I guess I'm not making it to retirement. They said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not making retirement 65 anymore. And I said, I guess I have to go count the numbers. So what do you mean? Thought you didn't have enough to retire. Basically, I don't. But if there's a way I can, I'm getting out of here. Walked off. Then it started getting around that and he's thinking of retiring early. I said, you're darn right. What made it worse? You walk up front, you buy a spark plug for a lawnmower. You're working on it, you need a spark plug. They hand you the spark plug. $60 you find out later. And they're not coming back telling you that it costs $60. I told you once! And I said, you told me once a year ago, and I've been working on diesel since. Now, if nobody in here has figured out a way to buy their spark plugs from Napa, he said they won't. They'll only buy them from OEM from Kubota. So, well, then that's their problem. Well, yeah, but it gets... How are we supposed to? I said, you put it on the ledger, $60. That's how we got it. Then send the customer up to talk to parts. Well, yeah, but we're the ones that said, I don't care. Don't come screaming at me because I've replaced injectors, worked on hydraulic pumps, and assembled 1,000 small tractors, new prep. So somebody here's got to fix it, and they got to stand up for it. But that isn't how it went. Customers couldn't buy spark plugs or hydraulic hoses they couldn't buy because they weren't set up for it. I said, you got to be kidding me. This is one of the easiest money makers that there is. And they said, what do you mean? You make one hose, you're done in 15 minutes. You charge the guy $200 anymore. And he says, well, that's not far off. I said, exactly my point. Well, yeah, but then it's parts labor. I said, you want to sell it or not? He needs a hose. He comes here. After a while, they started building up the hose and the fittings. Farmers started coming a little more often. We had less trouble in the shop. It was pathetic. It was similar to working other places I did, like Monroe Tractor, where we drove across town to get a single hydraulic hose almost every day. And everything to do the job was right there in the parts. Everything. If they had all the fittings. I was in there rifling through things, scuffling through them, pulling out parts and hoses and making hoses and going back and making formulas and handing it to them to put on their parts for months. And then all of a sudden they come out and said, wait a minute, this didn't get charged out, this didn't get charged out, that didn't get charged out. I said, no, it didn't get charged out by them, but it got charged out by me. What do you mean? I said, hand them a sheet of paper of everything I use, the recipe. It's not that hard. Didn't put it on a work order? Can't help you. This is the modern ag and commercial systems, not dedicated construction outfits, but the modern agricultural sliding into construction outfits, like similar to Monroe and Empires and others. This is where they're at. I don't know how to describe it any other way. It's bad. It's really bad. So I retired, got out of it. Can I afford it? No, not really. Not really, because the government went back through and nailed us for almost $10,000. Yeah. So what did you? Well, it's kind of irrelevant. So whatever buffer I would have had for a year's worth of wages on, it's gone. Thank you, feds. Don't have enough preparation H to fix that. But it's better than being out there in that world with people with low moral values, low care for the people that are beneath them. They have low leadership skills. If you're going to put management, now you're talking, you need to be a leader with leadership skills. And if you can't actually calculate to work with your employees at least as well as you work with a customer to get the job in, then you should not be in your position. So I'm coming up on a half hour of training for management. And that's probably how I'm going to put this. Training for management, not just lower management either, upper management, when you're sitting there calculating what's going on in a shop, all the way down through, so that you don't have to go back and have a pure ledger sheet to see what's going on. In fact, I encourage, if it was possible, I would demand it from the company owner on down to work to visit every single branch, one at a time, once a month, every month, even if it takes you 2 years to get through them all. Every single one needs to have the owner and lower management all go through there one at a time to see what's happening, not to sit there and critique all the way through, but to actually work with the people, work at the parts counter, work at the service phone, get out with a product support guy, visit the customers, see who they are, spend a week there, and learn what in the world is going on in your company. Even if you have to come back again. This time I'm here to visit parts, next time to visit service, next time to hang out with sales. And the other day is I'm the company owner. I'm hanging out with a product support guy because I want to talk to the customers to see what else they need and what I might be able to change in my company or my management position, or to help these guys service their customer better and more efficiently. Can I tell you, I'm going to leave you with this one last thing that I've never had a customer complain about, but I've always had management complain about. Always, because it's the wrong thing. It puts the wrong, no, it doesn't. It's the perfect message. They asked one time, I said, yeah, you guys just want our money. Well, yeah. He said, what do you mean? I said, we're here to confiscate as much money as humanly possible out of your pocket that will make you happy. And every single customer sits there and laughs and says, if it makes me happy, I guess then it's actually worth it. A thought for the day for you in management to keep in the back of your mind. See ya.